was a very aggressive gavel. Welcome to the Transportation and Transit Committee meeting. I'm here with my colleague, Councilmember Lambert Melton. Our two other colleagues will hopefully be joining us shortly, but we're going to go ahead and begin the meeting in the interest of time. We have two topics today, one on neighborhood traffic management. That's the item we'll do first. And then our second item will be sort of the Blue Ridge area transportation overview. Just so I can get a sense for timing, do we have any members of the public here to speak on this topic, the neighborhood traffic management program? No. And then can I get a show of hands for people who wish to speak on the Blue Ridge arena area? Okay, so 3. And y'all are kind of like one speaker group. Okay, so about 5. Okay. So when we get to that topic, we'll have a staff presentation, some time for questions, and then we'll open it up to the public, just to give you all a heads up on how that will go. And I'll pass it over to Assistant City Manager Michael Moore.
Good afternoon. And that was not an aggressive tap, but an authoritative tap. So nice job. Nice way to get us started. So first up today, we had shared with you the annual Neighborhood Traffic Management Program report. We shared that out with the full council. There were a few questions that came out of that around how we go through approval ratings, other tools in the toolbox, and then I think we had some specific questions about Falls River, how that was divided into segments and approaches that we might be able to take with that. Will Shoemaker is with us today. Will is the program manager, and he's going to walk through a presentation that hopefully can answer a number of those questions for you.
Yes, good afternoon, TNT Council members. As Michael stated, stemming from the March 4th NTMP annual report, there were a number of questions and clarifications, and wanted to talk through a couple of the policy components to get a better understanding and discuss what that may look like. So we want to look at the history of the NTMP, some approvals of projects, the removal from the list eligibility timelines, and then specifically Falls River Avenue, some overall data, and the history of past meetings and project offerings for that specific street and area. The next two slides really want to show the history of the NTMP and really want to highlight that this has been a program of consistent change, where the council has consistently tweaked the knob of qualifying and compliance and what streets get on and off based on staff feedback, based on community feedback, based on the wishes of the council at that time. So this really is hopefully a program of consistent improvement, but ultimately a program of consistent change. So we kind of bucketed the big phases of changes throughout time. So in 2009, the program was adopted. It ran through 3 or 4 cycles under a petition process, and then some greater neighborhood folks came out upset that they weren't included. It went to committee for about 2.5 years to discuss different options. In that time, it transitioned from a petition process to a multi-step engagement and a multi-ballot phase, where there were very high thresholds for approval set. Typically less than 5% of streets that went through the process at that time came through with an administrative approval. So with that first batch, we recommended a few changes to what those were. They lowered a little bit, and then it went from about a sub 5% to about a 25% approval rating. In 2019, we had made a handful of more list management changes, some simplifications in how we do things for the public to make it easier and more streamlined. And then the modern version of the NTMP that we have today, or the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program. In the last couple years, we've made a lot of these big changes, that with speed limit reductions going to a ballot process, which we can now initiate at the staff level to try to bring that consistent speed limits through all of Raleigh's neighborhood and local streets. We've consolidated traffic calming project lists. Instead of housing multiple lists with different criteria, we've consolidated that down into one list. The balloting, we removed the multi-ballot phase because we were getting a lot of feedback that it was confusing. People were telling us, I already voted yes, why are you asking again? It was creating friction and leading to some attrition and lack of participation as we got further in the process. We did want to increase that awareness, so we committed to doing more visibility by putting out signs, making sure that people were very aware in the case that they didn't get the mailer, missed it, whatever reason, there were signs on the street with our contact information that they could get in contact with us and figure it out. We also added an ability to do a pilot program, so that enables us to not necessarily be on the bleeding edge of traffic calming, but really stay on the forefront of what we're doing and test new things, work with our fire department in a controlled setting, work with our internal stakeholders to make sure that we're not creating issues, so that we continue to progress and grow the program in such a way that we're keeping up with trends and not just locked into one or two devices just because there's no way to test or advance. And then the last big change that has happened in the last couple of years is we removed the prohibition for traffic calming by any other entity outside of the neighborhood traffic management program. This does not mean that it became a mandate or a regulatory requirement for private development. It just lifted the restrictions that we had self-imposed previously, and then we work with our partners in private development to work with developers or work with whoever that comes in to try to make safe streets from the beginning, so that we're not having to go back and retrofit streets in the future, so that we can really focus on the streets that exist today and hopefully have a resolution to speed compliance and speeding streets at some point in the future. Kind of digging a little bit deeper into this, the different iterations of the process. So again, 2009 to 2015, we had a ballot process. And if you look at the graph, the first 3-ish years that we had that cycle, the green line is the approved projects. We had 100% approved that first year, but it maintained at about a 90% approval average over those first 3 years. In 2014, we had one where the greater neighborhood on a street came out and were very frustrated that they all lived off cul-de-sacs. They had to access that street to access the greater network. They're frustrated that they weren't involved. So council at that time removed those streets, and there was only a 54% approval rating, and that's whenever it went into the committee to discuss and the transition and the new requirements, the new process was established. And then coming out of 2017, whenever we went to the multi-ballot, the multi-step phase, it did go from about a 12-month engagement period to closer to a 24-month engagement period. So all those extra steps added time. And again, that time adds friction, less participation, and then you can really see how that skyrocketed the failure rate of this program, and that also coupled with the very high approval thresholds that were required. And then that's when the blue line really pops up. That blue line represents the council took special action after the engagement period to move forward, not administratively, but through special council action. So you can see that it shifted the balance from community to council decision and moving that forward. And then in 2020, we made some changes about how we implement and how we construct, and that's when we went from offering 10 projects each cycle to 20 projects each cycle using approximately the same budget. And then 2020 was the last year that we had an approval threshold as a requirement for approval through neighborhood ballot, and as you can see that year, there's a large number of projects moved forward by council to get things done. And then 22, 23, and 24, the last 3 years that we've had with no participation levels, we have about a mid 70% success rate. You can see that council does choose to move some streets forward at some times, but it's drastically different than the 2017, 2018, and 2020 project graphs. It was asked as we were talking through and looking at those different approval ratings, what if we adjusted, what if we shifted where those approval thresholds were from the policy perspective? So I'm going to start from the bottom of the graph and work up. So that bottom dark blue line is approved with a current approval threshold. So we're at about a mid 70 average approval rating. If we reduce the on-street and the neighborhood by 10% each, so going from a 70-60 to a 60-50, that would bump that approval rating up to about an 85% success rate on average. If we took it one step further and took the on-street down to 50% and then eliminate the neighborhood approval threshold, we would have a mid to upper 90% approval rating. So it really is up to you as a council to set the policy, set those thresholds to see where where and how many of these projects move forward based on historical data. I do really want to point out that any threshold that is put is drawing a line in the sand, and you're always going to have a last in, first out. And so these are all streets that have quantifiable speed compliance issues, and many of them have historical crash problems as well. So just because a neighborhood chooses not to move forward with that, that does not mean that the problems themselves go away. So it's really based on public feedback, what we hear from the public, the desire for traffic calming, as well as the policy decisions that you all direct staff to move forward with, can really dominate and dictate how many projects on average can move forward in any given project cycle. Moving into the next phase, we want to show where historical projects have been completed. So we have 68 completed projects throughout the city of Raleigh that are represented here. We have another 15 projects that are actively under construction, another 17 that are going out to bid April 2nd, and another 14 that you all approved on March 4th to begin survey and construction document generation that we're expecting to construct in spring of 26. So you all have made a pretty significant commitment to traffic calming and safe streets so far, and we're going to continue with that momentum and continue trying to pursue this as we find new streets and find new need. But with that, going back to the thresholds, 31 projects have failed historically through the project offerings. And then a breakdown of where all those projects have been offered, and also where everything has failed. A couple numbers of note. So there are 5 districts. You want to see about 20% if you want to equal love throughout the 5 council districts. This is a worst first program. This is not necessarily meant to have an exactly equal number of projects, but it's good to see an approximate equal distribution. So a couple things that do stand out is that District E has pretty close to that 20% distribution, but it constitutes for about 50% of all the failed projects throughout all projects historically offered. And then the other 2 numbers that stand out to us are districts, I guess B, C, and D, where B and D are lower and C is a lot higher. And as we were looking at these numbers, we looked through, and what we feel is probably a driver of that is District D has NC State. That's a huge chunk of land in there with private streets. We can't control those, so that's just a huge land area mass. And then also because of NC State, and whenever it was developed, that drives the development pattern. So there's a ton of multifamily with more private streets that we don't control. So that local street density that exists basically everywhere else is not the same. So there's just less opportunity in District D than there are in other districts. And then you look at the geographic areas of B versus C, is B is a lot smaller geographically, whereas C has really exploded in the last couple of years in area. And really, as the farther you get out in suburbia, the more you have to drive, the faster you are to likely drive. So those are kind of where we feel why some of these numbers are a little bit skewed off of that approximate 20%. But we're trying to make sure that every street that needs traffic calming is getting them, and hoping that we're spreading about approximately throughout all 5 council districts. Looking at the history of repeat failed projects. So of the 31 that have previously failed, we did pull out the 8 that you all just saw and did not choose to move forward a couple months ago, just because it kind of skewed the data with them being so fresh. About a third of them are back in the shop, either having approved projects that have been completed, projects that are under engagement again, on the list currently, or back under review. So again, going back to my previous point, just because a street votes no previously does not mean that the problem goes away. And there's very rarely any streets, well, I can say there's never been a street that has had 100% no, I do not want this. There's always going to be people that want safer streets and are going to continue to ask as is within their rights and their ability within the policy. As part of that conversation, we wanted to look at what does that prohibition look like? What is their ability to come back to us to create that repeat churn of work where we're going back through? So as it exists today, there's a 12-month prohibition of requesting a reevaluation for your streets. So the 8 streets that were officially removed on March 4th, they're not going to be eligible for reevaluation until March 4th, 2026. Sorry, I got my years wrong. If we shifted that to a 24-month, there would be 11 streets in that zone. There will be 3 streets added to that. None of those additional 3 streets are back in the hopper, so there'd be really no change in our workload currently. If we bump that out to a 36-month, there would be 16 total streets in that 36 prohibition zone, and so basically only 1 of the 16 streets in a 3-year period that have failed is back in for reevaluation. So again, it doesn't stop, but it takes a couple years for them to get the courage, decide to want to start the program again, feel like there's enough neighborhood churn that they can get something passed. So it really is up to you all to see what that prohibition is. If it's rather than a time, if it's how many times a project fails, then it kicks into not eligible. It really is up to you on how you want to discuss and approach that workload churn from a policy perspective. And then the last part of what came out of the March 4th presentation was Falls River. It is a very long and unique street that has received a number of past project offerings that have all been previously voted down. And wanted to share the past conversations that we've had surrounding these streets, the past attempts that we've had, and the past things that we've looked into and offered. So in August 2018, staff presented to council with the annual report Falls River 6, 7, and then Whittington Drive as eligible for project contention in that round. The district council member at that time chose to pull those streets for more consideration and more talks. Staff presented at the November 2018 TNT to talk about options for Falls River Avenue as a whole. What could they do as alternate instead of just speed humps? Couple of things that were looked at that time and directed by staff were to look at stop signs and speed radar feedback signs. So we looked at stop signs so stop signs are not traffic calming, and they do not really work at slowing people down. Traffic calming works because it's a sequence of consistently spaced things. Stop signs are not traffic calming because, logically, stop, that means slow, but we're also dealing with people and human behavior. So if we're installing a stop sign that is improperly placed based on warrants, it can feel punitive, and then people can decide to make up for perceived lost time. And so with that, you tend to see, or typically can see, that more aggressive driving happens, faster acceleration, harder stopping, and then those peaks where people, if you've got a long stretch, you kind of go up and then you stay at about the same speed and then slow down when you have to stop. If you've got consistent stops that are spread out too far, you can see a lot harder and faster peaks with higher speeds. So you can actually make streets less safe by adding stop signs at intermittent and non-logical places or at improper spacing. So we looked at that, and it really, with the streets and what makes sense, there was not really a good sequence along Falls River Avenue. Another factor with stop signs is they are signs, and they require people to choose to obey them. And the best way for people to obey stop signs is for them to feel like they are necessary, and that means that there's pressure from the side streets. The Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices typically wants to see volumes at a 60-40 split or closer, and a lot of these were 5-to-1 volumes on the major street to minor street or greater. So it's one of those, whenever we see that big of an imbalance, people will start to feel that they are being unjustly stopped. Their speeds can go up, but then secondarily, stop compliance can really decrease, where people first start rolling the stop sign because there's never anyone there to require them to stop. And then a lot of times it can result in people just blowing through the stop signs, which that makes it a lot less safe, because if you're a person walking, you see a car coming, they've got a stop sign, they've got to stop. But if I drive the street every day, I never see anyone coming here, I'm listening to the radio and I blast through it. It just creates that uncertainty and that misalignment of priorities between people and expectations. And we try to, stop signs are a great tool. I'm not going to sit here and say that we don't use them and they don't have great applications for when we do them. but it really is a balance that we try to strike, and there's a balance in everything that we do. And then also the radar feedback signs. At 2018, we really hadn't deployed enough to have any good data. We've actually, shortly after this or shortly before this presentation in 2018, we had installed a couple. We looked at pre-installation, during, and they've actually run their useful life, and we've removed them. The 85th percentile speed, meaning that 85% of drivers are going at or under the speed, is about 1 mile an hour. So these cost about $15,000 to $20,000. You have to buy them in as a pair, and they're having virtually no impact on driver speed in the long term. And so as comparison, a speed hump cost about $8,000, so we can get 3 speed humps for the price of 1 set of something that's not really effective. And so those are the things that we looked at. Staff really didn't recommend either of those options at that time, and the council member wanted to take this information, have discussions, see where it went. And then about a year later, in November 2019, staff was requested to bring this back to the council to look at what engagement with the entire neighborhood will look like instead of just these 3 streets. And with that, the 3 streets, it's about 800 properties that we'd be engaging with. If we engage the entire neighborhood, we'd be trying to pull in a meeting with about just under 4,000 people. With targeting this entire neighborhood with one project, it would be an increase in resources, and it'd be breaking from our worst first policy. In the next couple of slides, we're going to break down each of the 7 sections of Falls River Avenue and why there are 7 sections and where they stack up. And then, so staff recommended at that time that council remove the hold on these 3 streets. Let's just go by the policy, see where that takes us. We started engagement in January 2020 with these 3 streets, and all 3 sections voted against the project. So Falls River Avenue is really unique in its length, because there are not many neighborhood streets that are 4 miles long. The NTMP policy has a stipulation of projects being about 1 mile of maximum length. And so we broke these up into logical sections that we felt like made a lot of sense. We don't want to just go 1 mile and stop and draw the line, because that's going to be mid-block. You want to stop at logical intersection points. And the fact that there is pretty consistent traffic circles or transitions or character changes along the entirety of Falls River Avenue, we made the decision to break them up into, again, 7 sections and have those breaks largely at the traffic circles to bring that consistency and break them down. Looking at the data for all 7 sections, the Falls River 1, that red section that connects to Durant, is not eligible. It is classified as a minor thoroughfare. It's the one that connects to all the commercial and the shopping. So it's not a local street. It's supposed to be that collector of everyone to get to the commercial areas. So we don't consider traffic calming for Falls River 1 at all. Falls River, the second section, the 2025, this is going to be our first project offering for that section of the neighborhood. Falls River 3, they've had 1 previous offering. It was in 2024. Falls River 4 has had 0 previous project offerings. They are eligible, but it's about 5 years out at this point, 5+ years out at this point. Falls River Avenue 5, this will be its second project offering with the 2025 grouping. Falls River 6 has had 1 previous project offering, and it's back on the list, but it's about 3 years out. And then Falls River 7 is getting its second project offering with the 2025 batch. So again, these streets all have varying different levels of need and have had varying different levels of engagement and different times that we've offered projects to them. I will say that we've tried to learn from past conversations where we've offered humps, we've offered circles, we've offered curb bump outs. And the reoccurring thing is people just vote no in this neighborhood for whatever reason. So we've tried to throw every tool that we have available within the typical traffic calming at the different sections in this neighborhood as appropriate, and largely the response has continually been against the effort. As you can look at the data for each of the 7 sections, you can really see that it's really high, about 5,000, 5,500 on where you can get out, and then as it decreases as you get further in. So that's just people finding where they live and stopping because they don't want to drive the whole way. And with that, the driver speeds stay pretty consistent at a low to mid 30s throughout the whole street. But the one thing, again, that really stands out, that each section seems to have some level of a crash compliance. You know, Falls River 3, when we last evaluated, there was 1 crash in the previous 3 years. Falls River 5 had 3 crashes in the previous 3 years. Falls River 7 had 3 crashes in the previous 3 years, and Falls River 2 crashes. So, I mean, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this area has had 9, this one street, 4-mile street, has had 9 speed-related crashes in the past 3 years. We didn't evaluate them all in exactly the same year, but it's still, that kind of gives you the level of severity that this is a repeat problem that we're trying to alleviate, and really feel that traffic calming is a major solution to stop and eliminate these crashes. Based on historical traffic calming data, whenever we have streets that have had past compliance crash issues, we see on average a 74% reduction in future crashes. So we have a pretty good success rate at slowing them down, or not slowing them down, well, slowing down drivers, but eliminating speed-related crashes by slowing down these drivers. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, or if there's anything you want to talk a little bit more about, I'm happy to discuss.
Councilmember Jones?
Thank you so much for this follow-up. I just wanted to clarify in my own mind, when we're talking about the failure, so when those go to vote and they fail, you've already done an assessment and said, hey, this would be a good project for traffic calming. So you've already made that assessment,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
now the residents are the ones coming and saying yes or no to that.
Correct. So the kind of the life cycle of a project is that we receive a request, we evaluate, it meets or exceeds our definition for a speed or crash compliance issue. We offer projects to the worst 20 projects throughout the entirety of the city, but all traffic calming in Raleigh as it exists today is an opt-in. So we go to the communities, offer a project, and they're choosing to opt out.
And then to follow up on that, even if we change the thresholds and said, okay, we're going to change it to 76 or 50, 60%, and we got more, we still only do 20. So even if we have more in the pot, you still have to narrow it down to the top 20.
Correct. So we only have the funding, the resources to offer up to 20 projects every single year. But with the way that the historical averages works, we only see 15 of those 20 projects that we offer moving forward.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much.
So to follow up on that, I think, just making sure, if we change any of these approval thresholds, there's not a budgetary constraint created by more projects moving forward.
No, we have the budget for 20 projects every single year. We just rarely hit 20 projects every single year.
Okay, got it.
From the time council says you can move forward with the project to implementation, to completion of that project, because no 2 streets are the same, so what's the average time frame of that?
So we'll take the expected timeline for the streets that you just approved on March 4th. So after that, Lorenzo and I, we've been starting to generate all the resources, so it's going to take us a couple months. So we'll engage with the community, get feedback, and I didn't stress this enough earlier, but engagement is incredibly important because they let us know the specifics of what treatment will work, what we need to do. We just have the blanket data. They give us boots on the ground knowledge. So I really want to stress that engagement is a crucial part of effective traffic calming projects. So we're currently working on creating those presentation resources, those preliminary plans, layouts to get the conversation going. We'll work with the communities probably for about 6-8 months, and then that ends in the ballot period. And then we come to you all to present the ballot results. You give us the thumbs up. That gives us the green light to go do survey and then create the actual construction documents, going from the high-level planning, pretty pictures that we can present to the communities that shares what that is. So we try to time that very specifically so that we are working on the survey and the construction documents throughout the spring, summer, fall, where we can then advertise in the winter months and then notice to proceed in the early spring. So with those that were approved March 4th to move forward with engagement, we'll engage this year. We'll come to you beginning of next year, seek authorization for construction. We'll do all that work, bid it winter 26, construct spring of 27.
So roughly 24 months.
Roughly 24 months from the first meeting to complete a project.
Okay. So if we have a year, but each year you're bringing us projects.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then one from me about the approval threshold. So, you acknowledged if we shift the approval thresholds down, wherever they are, there will always be like cusp cases that the council may want to consider for special action. In the list you just brought us, there were 8 that were were just definitely not meeting the threshold, and then there were like these 3 kind of special cases. Did you do any analysis on if given that same list, if we had shifted the approval thresholds down, like how many cuspy type cases would?
So not with that exact grouping. The 3 that I brought forward for potential were very, very close. But just looking at, instead of just one year, one data set, we went through all the years that we've had a ballot. And so So by shifting it to 60-50%, we go from a mid-70s to a mid-80s% expected approval rating. If we go to just a 50% on-street and the no neighborhood approval thresholds would have a 95% plus. So again, I can get you the numbers for that specific data, but this is resulting from all of the historical balloting, trying to get as big of a data set to make the averages as accurate as possible.
Sure. Yeah, no need to go pull that very specific use case that I mentioned. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on, we can only do 20 projects a year, and that's funding based. Are there any ideas of where else we could look for funding or any other funding strategies that you guys have thought of?
For existing streets, I looked at Michael. I don't.
So one of the actions that you did take in the past to change the policy, we did have a policy that only the city was allowed to implement traffic calming on a particular street. We changed that to say that a developer could do that during the course of their construction. So we can work with folks to say, it could be in that case, it could be a developer that might come in and say, we want to do street design a little bit differently to make sure that we maintain traffic compliance. It might be a homeowners association who say on our streets, there's a lot of ways that we can do that with that, having opened that policy up a little bit sooner. There are typically not tons of grant opportunities out there for this type of program, but Will is always trying to do places where he can improve the program. One of the actions that were in front of you were to look at things other than specifically stop signs and things like that. Do we do traffic circles? Do we do things like that that might be more quicker installs and a little bit easier to do? And so there are opportunities like that that we can continue to explore, but you have done some work to help the program bring other resources, maybe not necessarily financial, but partnerships and things like that to it.
And because I think of that because of Hardin Road, when we had that zoning case come up and there was a potential for the developer to, I think that's the same kind of thing that you're referencing.
Exactly.
But I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, that even if they put the funding with the city would still have to be the ones to implement it. They couldn't, like the developer couldn't build that. The city still had to do that. Am I correct in that?
In that case, I think because of the timelines, that's what we really recommended.
That's right.
Looking at private development, if it's a greenfield development where they're going in and they're making new public streets, we have one stakeholder and it's a lot easier for us to negotiate and talk with them. Whereas this specific one, they controlled a couple hundred feet of frontage and their development responsibility would be only out to the middle of the street. It gets very difficult to try to do the level of neighborhood buy-in for the rest of the street to get that on board and that approval thresholds. Because as you can see on the projects for city initiated, we're not at 100% success for people wanting that. So exactly how that engagement looks, is that going to be staff's responsibility to go forward and do that engagement with those communities? Does that mean that we're going to do 20 plus streets and we need more staffing? Does that mean we're going to do less on our list? So it gets complicated, and there's a lot of decision points that we can talk through, and we need to talk through if that's something you want to pursue.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a hard thing to solve because I think we all want safer streets, you know, for sure. We want to make sure that residents are safe, but having to go backwards in the neighborhoods that already have this, it presents this funding challenge that we have to overcome. So thank you so much.
All right, and knowing that we have another topic, trying to bring this one to conclusion, curious if the council has any thoughts on moving the approval thresholds. I would be in favor of moving to the 60-50. The current state is 70-60, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I would be in favor of moving to the 60-50 condition of on-street and neighborhood approval, but open to other comments from the council.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, I think it still comes down to capacity of staff. They can only do 20. It takes 24 months to get, on average, to get something done, which means you're always going to have a backlog because they're coming to us every year with projects. And on top of doing this, I'm assuming, is it a different department that does sidewalks, or is this the same group that does?
It's still within my group. We've got a couple extra people for that, but it's still going to
So
see my face a part of this a little bit too.
That's what I figured, but I wanted to bring that they're not just doing traffic calming. They're also initiating these other projects, trying to tie the two together when possible. So, you know, increasing more projects for the approval, you know, I guess it comes back to, what are we trying to fix? Is it just to get more projects through, or, you know, at a faster rate, but we still have a bottleneck of capacity and costs? So, I mean, I won't fight a vote of changing the threshold, but I just want to bring that realization to what we're dealing with.
So I think there's enough budget they're operating as though all 20 of the projects will be approved. There's enough budget, so whether more go through or not, I don't think it's a budgetary constraint. I don't.
They're only doing 20. So if they come and there's 24 projects that approve, I mean, 24 that could be approved, then let me ask this question. If you come and there's a list and say there's 24 that qualify, but you can only do 20, how do you determine which four?
So I guess to clarify, we're always just going to bring you 20. This is the percentages of what in that 20 move forward. So by moving from 60 that it is today, you can expect 15 to move forward. If you can, and please don't check my math here, if you do 60-50, it'd be like 17 and a half projects moving forward on average.
Okay.
So it's still within that 20, so that's not going to really impact our workload. But to your point, that 20 capacity still is the bottleneck, because there's a massive issue. And I guess one, further clarification, you as a council, this is not a state statute, this is your policy.
Right.
You can set the thresholds whatever you want them to be, and then at the table approve projects to move forward based on a council vote at that time. So if you don't want to move the thresholds, but you still want that ability, that is still your ability to do that.
As for me, I actually like that approach, but I'm at the will of the body.
Second.
Move the thresholds. Okay, so all in favor of moving the thresholds to 60-50?
Aye.
I guess what the motion really is motion to recommend to the full council body that we consider this, and then we'll call a vote for the full council.
And I guess one clarification before I step away is do you want the approval thresholds to be associated with the 20 that you just approved on March 4th? I just want to make sure that that's part of the clarification.
I think moving forward.
So with this project
leave well enough alone and move forward.
Well, we haven't
So on
started
March
engagement on
4th,
these.
We
and
just
if-
gave them a new list to start.
Yeah.
So he's saying, the new list that they're just
so on the
starting,
new
do they do it
list.
with these new rules or the old rules? I say new rules.
If I might suggest, maybe we do that with the next round to be a little bit cleaner. And that way we're not going back to communities where we've already given them information and backing that up. And so if we do that with the next round of projects that we bring you.
Sure, that's fine. And then moving, we feel good about that part? Okay.
Was anyone here to speak to this at all?
And then just to touch on Falls River, clearly there's a demonstrated traffic compliance issue on Falls River Avenue. You showed us, 10 crashes on just that one street, 9 crashes on just that one street? There's clearly issues going on here, and it's sort of devastating to me that that these neighborhoods are being offered projects, and they're saying, no, we would rather speed, and we would rather experience our neighbors being in crashes than have to slow down a bit. That's really hard to stomach. I understand why the Section 1 is considered to be different. It's near the commercial. Is there a different tool? I mean, we love a really direct democracy moment, but I wonder if a different approach to this is available. Like, what are other ways we could approach this?
I mean, I'm at a loss. I mean, the really, with the context and the widths of the streets, horizontal humps and adding in probably some traffic circles or curb bump outs at some of the intermediate intersections is going to be the best tool. You know, the things that we use on thoroughfares like road diets, where we reduce lanes and then use the excess capacity, either at bike lanes or you know, just take that space away from travel, isn't really an option here because it's already a 2-lane street. I really would worry if that we did do something like that even though there's not an extremely high utilization of on-street parking, we would have to completely eliminate on-street parking, and that's not from a backlash of I need my parking. It's from the perspective that on-street parking is a form of natural traffic calming, and by eliminating those kind of random people parking and having to force you to pay attention, we might exacerbate and make the problem worse. So it really, I was talking with our traffic engineering department a little bit further about what marking schemes, and it's well below the vehicle thresholds for even centerline marking. So this is a neighborhood street in its truest form. A lot of these sections are actually so narrow enough that you can't fit 2 travel lanes at a minimum and 2 minimum bike lanes. We need more asphalt to actually get bike lanes in on a lot of this street. So marking schemes are not really a viable alternative in this scenario on this street.
So in other parts of the city, when they've done like street resurfacing, and we've used that to add other markings to narrow the travel lanes, you're saying that's not a tool we can
That is
apply?
typically a tool used on thoroughfares whenever you're going from like a 4-lane section to a 2-lane section with a center turn lane. It's pretty rare that we do road diets on just strictly local neighborhood streets.
Well, I mean, I think this kind of highlights an ongoing issue that I think has been raised at the table a few times since I've been on council is I think it's great to receive public feedback on sidewalks and traffic calming and have a mechanism in place where people can say, hey, I live here and I'm acknowledging a problem and I need some city assistance. The other side of that, though, is I do think we have a proactive duty as a governing body in a city to be looking big picture of areas that we know need sidewalk connections or traffic calming or are safety concerns. And at that point, I think it becomes less of, do you approve us coming in and doing this? And we have to come in and do this for a safety reason and a city planning reason. And so where that line is, I think, is important. But on this situation, I would move forward with implementing whatever best practices staff believes will help this corridor. Because I don't think it should be that the neighbors get to say, we like speeding through here. And so the folks that are concerned for their children or their safety, they just have to deal with it because they can't get enough votes. That doesn't feel right. And so I would be in favor of moving this forward with whatever standards staff determines would be most effective within the current right-of-way.
So I'm thinking that I had hoped that you'd be like, okay, well, we can just put in a resurfacing project and use these other methods that we've used on Old Wake Forest Road. And it sounds like that's not, you are not saying we can do that. So I'm pivoting in the moment. And I think to echo what Councilmember Lambert Melton is saying, clearly there's an issue, but if we can't move it out of the program, I think 3 of these sections are in like next year's list. And it sounds like this is really the only tool, and that in a year's time, you're going to bring it back and you're going to tell us the broader neighborhood voted it down, and we're going to be putting that, we're going to have to, I think we should all remember this contextual information so that when you bring us that list, we can maybe move forward more swiftly. But with all that in mind, which one is the one that it was on the last list? Falls River 3?
Falls River 3 was on the 2024 list that was just removed.
So, yeah, so I think with all this in mind and hearing the disappointing news, there's maybe not a different tool or program where we can put this street. I'm going to make a motion to have Falls River 3 pushed through on the approved projects list through council action.
Second.
Unless there's other
What
comments.
was the vote count? What was the percentage?
It was, the on-street had a 88.89% approval rating. The neighborhood had a 58.54%. So they were
Yeah, they were
about 1.5
literally
percentage
one
points.
vote
Yeah.
from getting it.
Being
So-
that close, I can support it.
Okay, sweet. All right, so all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Great.
Well, thank
All
y'all.
right, thanks, Will. All right, thank you all for all your patience while we discussed that. We'll move on to topic 2, which is the West Raleigh and Arena area transportation. Michael?
Madam Chair, thanks. Just to maybe tee this up for Mr. Kimbrell at the podium a little bit. Council asked us to look at this in terms of just the broader context of traffic in this area, knowing that it's a really hot area for development. We've got a couple of big projects that have been in the news, and just to help provide the council a bit of context and learning about kind of the environment that's out there. Mr. Kimball's presentation is going to have that sort of broad context about what the street grid is, the authorities that we have over that area, some of the development patterns, some past planning, and some work that's happened. We do know that there is also interest in specifically a very immediate project that we have a public hearing coming up on soon, and that's why we wanted to give you this context and background. We do have some slides in there that the applicant for that project, the Nova project, has provided to us. We will have an opportunity for them to perhaps share some of those slides at the end of his presentation, but just want to let you know that this is in advance of that public hearing, and it's really more for context and not necessarily for any action today.
Thank you, Michael. Bradley Kimbrell, Transportation Department. And I don't have near as many graphs and charts, but I do have a lot of maps, so I hope that's exciting. We'll do a pretty high-level overview of the area. We will share some information about the context as far as who owns property and who maintains the corridors in this space. I'll touch on active projects, but I won't spend a ton of time. I'm happy to answer questions. I just want to be respectful for the time that we have today. I will have a slide that speaks to traffic congestion, and then cover in the planning efforts. So as I mentioned, for every map going forward, I've tried to put a blue star over the Lenovo Arena so that you kind of get a frame of reference at every stop. The green lines on the right side are city streets. So those are city-maintained streets. Pretty much everything else that shows up gray on our map is going to be a state-maintained facility. That includes Edwards Mill, Blue Ridge Road, Trinity Wade, et cetera. There is a segment of Blue Ridge that takes off northeast from Durley. That is a city stretch. So as your eyes get adjusted to the color, this now reflects the property ownership in the area. That, what's supposed to be a red color, is state-maintained, state-owned property. Includes Umstead Park. It includes the area around the arena, obviously NC State University, and then we've also highlighted Meredith College and other academic facilities, and then the hospital too. As you can see, quite a bit of the property in this area is state-owned. That is particularly important because it does have an effect on how development patterns occur. It also affects the city's regulations. So as I mentioned, we're going to cover a couple slides about projects, active projects. The three that I'll mention, Blue Ridge Road, those two segments, north and south, are complete streets projects. Lake Boone Trail, also a complete street project. That one is wrapping up now that our seasonal limitations have been lifted. Obviously, the Blue Ridge Bike and Pedestrian Bridge there at the Wade Interchange. We have a nice picture of that. And then last month, this committee got a presentation from Vision Zero related to some intersections. And one in particular, we have information about if you have more questions, is there at Edwards Mill and Wade. And then not to be left out, Western BRT at the bottom of the page there. Here's DOT, the active DOT projects. Most of us are very familiar with the Beltline and the work that's happening there along Wade, Hillsborough Street, and then the grade separation there with Hillsborough and Blue Ridge, which the website says is set to be completed at the end of this calendar year. So as promised, I did have a slide here to speak about congestion. So this map reflects the average afternoon PM peak congestion rates. And really what we've done is compare the afternoon congestion travel time with normal free-flowing travel time conditions and created kind of a comparison. You'll notice the darker areas has the highest afternoon PM peak congestion, and those are on, again, state-maintained facilities. That is particularly important because NCDOT, and you know, by all means would welcome the applicant to speak to this if they felt the need to. NCDOT and the City of Raleigh, we coordinate heavily on development in the area, TIAs that get produced, and we study those. The Lenovo project, as mentioned, had been in conversations with the city and the state since the fall. We have plenty of questions, and they've provided some information, but the conversations are continuing. And as you may be aware, NCDOT has stated they are not going to provide formal comments or complete a review of a TIA during the rezoning stage. They would like to see a real scenario of a site plan. And so as we await their formal review in the months to come, at that point we'd have a much better picture of what improvements, what transportation solutions we would expect to see on the surrounding intersections. So again, from this, I'm going to go a few slides over the comprehensive plan. This is the city's adopted plan. Largely this area was captured back in a 2012 study that the city did. It really broke down this area into distinct districts. You know, health and wellness around Rex Hospital, arts and research district. The Lenovo Center is located in that yellowish area known as the entertainment and education district, and then south of Hillsborough is another district. Several strategies that came out of that study that is reflected in the adopted comprehensive plan: increased connectivity for the smaller blocks, increase that walkability, access to transit. Also acknowledged a lot of the barriers in this space, such as interchanges, railroads, controlled access facilities, and to recommend grade separating those. Obviously a constraint, and it goes back to one of our earlier maps with all that red property ownership. The large land holdings of state properties does create challenges when we look at how development patterns could ultimately create public streets, public infrastructure. This slide is really just to highlight, since that 2012 study that went into the comprehensive plan, there have been a number of projects that are in the works. They were identified in that early study and are currently either completed by the city or in the process of being completed, or we were able to add as a betterment into NCDOT's Beltline project. And again, that rendering of the bike and ped bridge. Just to reiterate the point from that study, it did see development in this area, to increase in intensity, a tighter block. You'll see there on the left, it recommended more street grid, and then tighter blocks of public streets. And then that on the right-hand side is just a rendering of what we would start to see in some of the developable build-out. Last item before we turn it over to friends in transit. Along this area and along the northern section of the Lenovo site is the Triangle Bikeway. And the Triangle Bikeway is a multi-municipal planning effort. It encompasses about 23 miles between Chapel Hill and Raleigh, and it ties directly into our Capitol Greenway system. You can see that the majority of the corridor will run parallel to I-40 and is expected to be in that bottom left screen for separated bike and pedestrian facilities. So I'll turn it over to transit.
Sorry, Bradley, one quick question before you
course.
pass the mic. On that previous slide, this does not yet exist. This is planned.
That's right, it's planned. I believe this study was completed last year, the end of 2024.
Okay.
And so as the plan does, it will then create some implementation strategy, and agencies will find ways to make this infrastructure happen. But
Okay.
essentially, it is really meant to create that continuity from Raleigh that ties into our Greenway system that is so popular and effective, and then tied all the way out to the Triangle area.
Okay. And it will be done as is it waiting on private development, or is it will be done as like a public works project?
I believe there's a number of different strategies. We can follow up with more information as the team. That's handled by Campo, and we can get that information and provide that to you in a manager's update.
That'd be great.
All right, good afternoon, David Walker, Transit Division. And I'm just going to give a very brief overview of what our existing transit service looks like, a few changes that are forthcoming, talk a little bit about BRT on Western Boulevard, and then a FAST study that is being completed. So on the map, you'll see the same blue star here that overlays the Lenovo Center. Our two nearest transit routes to that facility are the 27 Blue Ridge and the 26 Edwards Mill. That 27 route operates every 30 minutes through 7 p.m. at night, and then it goes hourly. The 26 currently operates every 30 minutes in the peak periods and hourly in the off-peak periods. Unfortunately, the 26, just the ridership on that has never performed where it needed to be, and it's not meeting the existing benchmarks and measures that are required in the Wake Transit Plan. It is funded 100% by the Wake Transit Plan. So we are looking at sunsetting that Route 26. We're going to reconfigure a couple of other routes, 27 and the number 4. We'll pick up the majority of service that 26 was covering, but there will be a small segment on Edwards Mill that will no longer have service. That is scheduled to take place in June of this year. One thing that we have recently done in the area down on Western Boulevard at Jones Franklin is I believe in the last 6 months, we opened up a new enhanced transfer point. It's a nice large bus stop with I think it's a 24-foot bus shelter, all the amenities that go with a nice transfer point. We built about a 120-foot long pull-out for buses to stage there. We can get at least 3 buses in there. Currently, 3 Go Raleigh routes serve this transfer point. 1 Go Cary route serves the point, and 2 Go Triangle routes operate from this location. So we're getting a little bit over 100 boardings per day just on our Go Raleigh ridership. I don't have the ridership for the other 2 agencies at this point. The Western BRT skirts along kind of just to the south of the Lenovo Center. I think you've all seen this map and some of this information before. We did highlight where the enhanced transfer point is there about midway that will also serve, or at least be served in close proximity by that Western BRT. We do want to highlight that there are 18 new stations that will be built on this BRT corridor, with one obviously there at Blue Ridge Road as well. It's about 7.5 miles of dedicated runway on the full 12-mile corridor. We will use our 60-foot articulated buses on this, and we are exploring the opportunity to purchase electric when the time comes for this corridor. And signal priority, transit signal priority, I think we've talked about that to the council as well, but basically what that does is the bus can send signals to the traffic engineering boxes to, if the bus is running a little bit behind, it can hold that green light or turn, whatever it needs to do to make sure that bus stays on schedule. And kind of in conjunction with, forward thinking, FAST is a study that was, it's a long-range planning study provided by the NCDOT and many local municipalities, collaborated on this project. The original FAST study was done back in 2020, 21, and it's currently being updated. A 2.0 version will be coming out. FAST stands for Freeway, Arterial, Street, and Tactical Study. There's a whole lot of stuff on this slide, and I'm not going to read that, but I did find a nice brief paragraph that I think sums up what this project does overall. This is not something that I've been working on myself over the course of the past year as it's being updated. But what the study will do is focus on ways to advance the implementation of transit priority infrastructure, such as making our freeways and streets transit ready. It includes accelerating BRT linkages to RTP, RDU, downtown Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and Cary. It includes the advancement of SMART, which the acronym is on the screen, stands for Systematic Management Adaptable Roadways Through Technology. And it will create better operations for transit and all vehicles at lower cost with lower impacts to traffic overall. So we just wanted to put this out there. It's another long-range planning study that is focusing on implementation of transit infrastructure and will hopefully help this area have better traffic management. And I think our next slide is going to questions, so Brad and I will be available for any questions that you may have.
And Madam Chair, we do have the follow-up slides from the applicant here, if you would like to hear those at any point in time here. So.
Sure. Do members of the committee wish to hear a little bit more about the TIA conducted by the applicant? Or do you want to hear from the public first? Okay. Okay. All right. So we will plan on 3 minutes per person. Why don't we start with our youngest guests? They'll join us. I think we're going to get them a handheld mic. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, here, I'll start.
Hi, my name is Karma Myers, and I'm simply here to introduce 4 of my students from the Raleigh School. These are 4th graders who have taken their recesses to plan to present at this meeting. So I'm going to start by introducing Ryan Zamani, Dylan Young, Amanda Page, and Kaylin Bowers.
Oh. Before you begin, apologies. I do need to make a disclaimer. I think everyone understands this, but to be very clear, today we are discussing the context of the overall area. There is a rezoning that is coming. That will be heard by the council on April 1st at 7 p.m. If you care deeply that your comments that you give are associated to the record of the rezoning, you would need to give those on April 1st at 7 p.m. These comments you're welcome to give, but are not exactly tied to the rezoning. So I just want to make sure that nuance is understood before we begin. All right, take it away.
Hello, my name is Ryan Zamani, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about the history of the Raleigh School, TRS. TRS is a small independent school located about 2/10 of a mile away from the Lenovo Center. We have been located on Edwards Mill Road for 28 years, but the school was chartered in 1955 and moved a couple of times before finding its permanent home. It was founded as a playgroup and has grown to have a preschool with 140 students, an elementary with 246 students in grades kindergarten through 5th. It is built on 18 acres of land, which is mostly woods, and that's a big part of what makes our school special.
Hi, my name is Dylan Young. The Raleigh School is built like a community. All the classrooms have outdoor space, and the kids are supposed to be outside as much as possible. Playing, being outside, and having a lot of freedom to move around is one thing that all Raleigh School students value and want to protect. Most of our class is excited about having more games to go to and more things to do close to our school. We want to make sure that the people planning this development know that we are a preschool and elementary school and that we have some concerns, especially about traffic.
Hello, my name is Amanda Page, and this is my first year at the Raleigh School. TRS is a very unique and special school. Not all schools allow students to play in the woods, build forts, go to the library whenever we need to, and just walk to recess, lunch, and extracurriculars on our own. We learn responsibility and how to do things independently, and it's important to all of us that we keep it that way. Thank you.
The Lenovo Center will bring many fun experiences, but we are worried about some of the issues that might cause problems for our school. My name is Kaylin Bowers, and I'm here to talk about traffic concerns and possible solutions. We already have issues with cars speeding by during drop-off and pickup. At the Raleigh School, we have kids as young as 18 months old to 11 years old coming here, and we are worried that Lenovo Center will bring bad, unexpected traffic. Along with more cars and more people, there will be more speeding and possibly more danger. Our school is already experiencing disruptions during pickup, and last Friday, March 21st, parts of Edwards Mill were blocked and parents were calling the school because they are worried they would be late for pickup. We do not think there will be a problem with the start of school because drop-off is 8:20 to 8:40 a.m., but we are worried about dismissal times, which range from 2:40 p.m. until 5:30 p.m. But our class didn't just want to focus on problems, so we also came up with ideas for how our school could be safer now and after the expansion. Here are a few things we think might help traffic safety. Better signage, possibly with flashing lights during important drop-off and dismissal times showing we are a school. Regular patrols by police to catch speeders and to help with safety at our school. A sign that measures the speed cars are going in front of the school. And if traffic at dismissal becomes a problem, maybe we could even have an officer assigned to help the Raleigh School cars get through. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us and for helping our school find ways to stay safe. We know that we will be long gone by the time the Lenovo Center expansion is complete, but our class wants to help future TRS students have the same safe experience we have at school. We are looking forward to finding out how the Department of Transportation will help the flow of traffic near our school. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all for your advocacy. Appreciate that. Who else do we have to speak? Why don't you start, Ms. Spooner?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Jean Spooner. On one hat, you know me. I'm the chair of the Umstead Coalition. But mostly today, I'm representing the board for the Alliance of Reedy Creek Trenton Road Corridor. I'm on that board as it's a volunteer neighborhood organization, Trenton Road, very close to the arena. Thank you very much for the multi-use separated path now that joins this corridor from the Art Museum to William B. Umstead State Park, Schenck Forest, etc. So this is a vibrant corridor for public resources. We have Rex Hospital, Art Museum, the new DHSS with almost 5,000 new employees about to be upon us, the arena, Carter Finley, the fairgrounds. Is vibrant. But right now the mode is single cars coming and going. It's not working. You have the fair. To say, oh, we have to just live with the fare is really not viable. That does have some special event buses, but you put two events in, as the Umstead Coalition suffered in October 18 of last year. We had our 90th anniversary on the Glenwood Avenue of Umstead State Park. Our pizza vendor, our beer vendor, our music folks couldn't get there. Those two events, a concert and the fair, clogged the traffic, not only in the Blue Ridge corridor, but all the way out to Glenwood Avenue. So, and I like the bike ped alternatives, but I think event transportation, dedicated bus lanes, similar to what you do for your Dick's events. You know, you put 40,000 people at some of your Dick's events. You do it by remote parking, dedicated bus lanes. So I think there's a lot more here that should be done besides encouraging parking on site by single cars. There's also other concerns with fire access, fire trucks, access to the hospitals during emergencies. So we've got a lot of access issues that come before us when we have these big events. And now this is being planned for multiple events on the same day and night, and multiple days. So I think there's a lot here of opportunity that I hope the council looks at to change the way we get to these events. And I think that we can, there's a lot of partnerships there. I look forward to working with you and all on these exciting projects.
Good afternoon. My name's Tim Thronson. I chair the board at Cardinal Gibbons, and I want to say thank you for allowing us to speak in here in our voice. We've got similar concerns to our friends at the Raleigh School and others. The event parking is an issue for us as well. Already we're running into issues in the event parking when we try to have a significant event. There's other events going on, so we wholly support that as well. Our issues center around a couple of major issues. One is pedestrian safety, and already it's not a very pedestrian-friendly area, and I would argue it's not a pedestrian-friendly area in terms of getting around. So that's one of our concerns. We have 1,600 kids in our school. 800 of our children, students, they're young adults, are allowed to go off campus for lunch, and there's constant movement on the campus. So that's one of our concerns, is the pedestrian. The other is we've got 800 juniors and seniors as well, many who drive to school. So we're concerned about the congestion, but we're also concerned about the safety, the traffic safety as well, given that every year that there are going to be new juniors and new seniors, and they're going to be inexperienced. We have 800 inexperienced drivers driving every year. So that's a significant concern of us. And the final concern is construction traffic. These big trucks moving through on Edwards Mill and Trinity Mill Road, when we have these inexperienced drivers, and when we have people at the Raleigh School as well who are working to get their kids to school. So appreciate you guys taking all of this into consideration as you're making decisions as how that area develops. And you'll hear more from us as well as at the Raleigh Council meeting in terms of just the Lenovo development, which we support, but we have significant safety concerns around as well. So, and I just want to publicly acknowledge that the developer and Gale Force Sports have been working with us to try to solve some of those issues, and we'd like to see them continue to work with us. And they've been very gracious with their time, and they're busy people, and it's a major commitment on their part to do that. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that as well. Thank you.
I'm Ramey Kemp with RFK Engineers. We're a traffic engineering firm. Our services have been secured by Cardinal Gibbons to advise them on the result of the TIA, which we've reviewed and found very adequate. I think the other thing is the pedestrian movement, which is very important. We're going to have a lot of kids crossing Edwards Mill Road. The attraction that Lenovo is bringing to this area is going to attract these young kids at their lunch hour. It will attract them after school. And it's great to see the effort that you're putting into this to try to bring sanity to all of it, because it's a challenge. It's a great challenge, and it's a great opportunity. And we're looking at it at Cardinal Gibbons in that way. I will be following along all the pedestrian recommendations, as I'm sure you will. And you'll probably hear from us if we don't like something. So, and so far, I have to admit that they've done a fine job of coming forward to us with ideas and with the plan to take a good look at the pedestrian movement. I know there's gaps in the sidewalk along Trinity, along Edwards Mill. I'm hoping all of that's going to be addressed during what we're doing. For the number one city in the country, the destination of everybody, you know, we need to do the best. So thank you.
My name is Gene Bressler. I'm a board member of the West Raleigh Alliance, formerly the Blue Ridge Corridor Alliance. And I'm also a retired professor from NC State in the Department of Landscape Architecture. And I see I have a number of prospective students that will join our program in the coming years. One of my jobs or roles on the West Raleigh Alliance is to serve as the chair of the development panel. And over the last several months, I have to say we've had a number of really very positive, constructive meetings with the Lenovo team, particularly the zoning folks that are somewhere back in through here. There they are. They've been very responsive to our questions. They've made very thoughtful presentations to our board. And we've also had a number of conversations with various community groups, including residents, renters, property owners, members of the various institutions. And it's been a very exciting experience for us. And I have to say, overwhelmingly, the West Raleigh Alliance is very excited and very supportive of this project. And one of the benefits of having these conversations is that a number of questions have come up, particularly regarding transportation-related issues. And a lot of them were raised already this morning or this afternoon. But I'd like to introduce my colleague, Nathan Spencer, who is a traffic engineer who could speak more specifically about the questions that we've identified.
I appreciate that. My name's Nathan Spencer. I am one of the co-chairs for the Transportation Committee for West Raleigh Alliance, and I'm also a transportation planner in my professional life. And I want to reiterate what we found is that this project is very good. We're excited to be part of this, and we're looking forward to it. Our concerns are not developer related, they're the region at large related. So we have three categories that we're kind of looking at. It's coordination, transit, and safety. In terms of coordination, making sure that the wayfinding, event planning, community relations are all working together for the area, including the athletics area, state fair, museum, Cardinal Gibbons, the schools. There's also that need for a regular community planning for the area, making sure that everyone is talking to the community members and business owners. That was something that we'd love to see. We'd like to know a little bit about what the plan is for parking for employees. As it's growing, we want to make sure employees have access and have ways to get there, if not by vehicle as well, which leads us to the transit. We'd like to have some exploration about multimodal transit hubs, access for bikes, bike share, ride share, loading, unloading zones, stuff like that. We'd like to see a connection with BRT and Western Boulevard that can make that more seamless. We know that there's some distance there, but there's opportunity. We'd like to know if there's a way to get those greenway trails to go through the property so that that can continue rather than going around. Also find that there's plan for the transit infrastructure to grow over time. So as they grow, can we look at step by step? So it's not on just the city and the state to do this all at once, but let's see a staged plan. Lastly, safety is how to maintain safe pedestrian access for children and adults, and how the venue would be managed from a safety perspective overall. So that's what we found. We'll gladly send this all to you, but we'd love to see coordinated attention from all the partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else here from the public with comments to give? Okay, great. Well, thank you all for sharing your thoughts and feedback. We heard some themes related to pedestrian safety, traffic flow during event times and how they overlap with ingress and egress of our schools, transit integration, and broader sort of ongoing community feedback. So I know the applicants are in the audience and are making note of that. At this time, I'll turn it back to my colleagues to ask questions of staff and whoever else we need to hear from.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. If I can get either David or David, whichever one, to talk about the bus access for events. I know when NC State has events, the Wolf Line runs, but if we can speak to any other Go access, because I've seen Go Raleigh buses out there for different events. How do we determine when a bus is out there?
Yeah, so good afternoon, David Eatman, Transportation Transit. It's a great question. I think anyone that has been to the state fair over the years, certainly COVID did stop us for a while, but just last year we did start back providing park and ride to the state fair, which runs over a 2-week period, and obviously we run from like 7 a.m. in the morning or 8 a.m. until after 9 o'clock when the fireworks are, but that's an all-day event. When you think about our transit capacity, we're really capped at a 20% spare ratio for our entire fleet. So at any given time, that's the only extra buses we have because we have everything on the street providing service. So it's a bit challenging for us to provide large amounts of service for special events. We do ramp up for the state fair, again, because that's spread out over a long period of time. What transit systems struggle at are events where you have 35,000 people that all like to arrive in the first 2 hours before the event, and then they all like to leave at exactly the same time, especially if your team lost. So, that's just a challenge for buses to handle. So that's kind of our perspective on that. Should you want, or do you want access to those facilities? Most definitely. You still want to get access for employees. You do want a mode mix. It doesn't mean that we're going to carry 60, 70% of the population that's going to an event, but there may be individuals that want to ride transit to an event. So again, as with any major destination that we serve, access is important. Access and ingress and egress from from a mixed-use district, whatever that may be. So that's the best way I can kind of characterize our challenges as it relates to major events of that size.
And I know the answer to this question, but I want you to share it. If someone wanted to increase the bus load and charter buses, what's the policy around that?
Well, for us,
in order to increase that capacity.
Yes. So for us, obviously, we can use our vehicles for scheduled services that we advertise. But for someone that wanted to go out and get private charters, they can certainly do that. But again, we can't use, so there are ways that we provide that service, again, for state fair and special events, but that has to be advertised, and we do follow our normal policies for the transit system. I'm not sure if that's where you were headed with the question there.
Well, I'll rephrase the question. If we were going to have the Megan and Jonathan concert at Lenovo Center,
it would sell out.
And it's going to sell out.
Yeah.
Could we say, hey, we want more Go Raleigh buses to service people to get them there in the beginning, at the end of the event?
So anyone can make a request to go Raleigh. Do we have the capacity to provide that? That would be the challenge.
Okay.
I just have a few comments to add. When we were voting, this isn't really necessarily for you, but I don't want you to think I have a question for you. When we were voting on the interlocal agreement, I basically didn't want you to stand there awkwardly expecting a question that wasn't going to arrive. When we were voting on the interlocal agreement that sort of set in motion all these improvements, the private development, I said at that time, I'm very excited about this upcoming redevelopment of this area. It's going to be transformative, probably the most impactful project in Raleigh in a very long time. But it cannot be an area that can only be accessible by single-use vehicles. It just cannot. And so we really do need to be looking holistically at the pedestrian safety and then transit. I'm serving as our alternate to Campo now. I was at the meeting last week. We did discuss the Fast 2 project. I think knowing now that there's not going to be any funding for commuter rail anytime soon, we're going to have to supplement the intent of commuter rail with bus rapid transit and other types of road-based transit. And so I hope we will get some bus rapid transit from RTP to the airport to this new entertainment center and then downtown. I think that's going to be critical. The other thing, and maybe someone in this room will have a direct line of communication, I've mentioned this several times, I do not understand why NC by Train will not add a permanent stop at the fairgrounds. They run it for the state fair. At the very least, it should be running for every single Hurricanes game. I'd argue every NC State game, but even the Hurricanes, if that's the Carolina Hurricanes, if it's the Carolinas team, let's make it accessible by more folks across the state. They can pop up that infrastructure for a few weeks for the fair. I don't understand why they don't run it for concerts, and I think that would be maybe something we should be discussing too. If anyone has a direct line of communication to Amtrak or NC by Train, I think that would be critical. Maybe our staff can reach out. And then, of course, way back in the day in college when I would tailgate and we couldn't find a spot, we would park basically where that old Kmart is on Western, and that's where our BRT stop's going. It is accessible. I mean, you have to walk, but with all the improvements that NCDOT is doing with the bridge and removing the at-grade crossing there, it's going to become even more accessible. And so making sure that you can get there by bike or scooter or by foot, I think is going to be important too. But I absolutely agree with everything I've heard that we need to make it safe and a place that people don't just go to and leave via car. One, it's bad for traffic, bad for the environment. And also, if we're going to have all these bars and restaurants out there, we don't want people driving home after they're enjoying the new atmosphere. So we got to keep working on it.
David, I do have one more question for you. Microtransit policy that we were talking about around BRT, can you speak to that, where we are?
I'm sorry.
Microtransit, that last mile from stops for BRT?
So in some of our areas that are usually less dense, we are looking at microtransit. We have an area up near Rollsville now, which has a large zone. Mr. Walker earlier was talking about the Edwards Mill route, and that area we're looking at as potentially implementing microtransit as well. That's in a planning study. It needs to be evaluated through Wake Transit because that's a Wake Transit project. So lots of work to do there, but certainly around some of our stations where it makes sense. The main thing for us is really just making the built environment accessible to pedestrian and bicycles, quite honestly. That's the biggest thing for us. When we have that built environment around the station, really any of our transit hubs that we already have where we have, several routes coming together, when you have that sidewalk connectivity, the bicycle connectivity, that's when you really have a great environment and we have tremendous ridership improvements, quite honestly, that go along with that type of built environment.
I do not have a question for you, David. Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment, and it's really about kind of a question, kind of a comment about the overall scope of what we're talking about. So we're doing this here, and I love this meeting so we can daylight this to the community. And I want to highlight the West Raleigh Alliance and the awesome conversation that we had. I forget the gentleman's name, but also by Mr. Spencer, organized this over a few weeks ago, and Councilmember Harrison was there. And so what I'm really hopefully looking for is how do we have more of this? How do we have more of these conversations so we can teach? Because when we say a TIA has been done, I still don't really understand what that even means. And so we are learning what the TIA, but also the process of when we can have these conversations. And, as they mentioned earlier, in the site plan phase is when we can really start having the conversation with DOT. And what I think the missing piece here is how do we communicate that to the community? How do we make sure that people in this meeting, people in next week's meeting, understand that the conversation doesn't end when the vote takes place? And how can you help us in our partnership to make sure that that's an ongoing conversation, that we can lead people to you and say, all right, here, help me answer this, so that their fears are assuaged, because I don't want people just frustrated with something that hasn't even really fully been decided yet, but they may feel that next Tuesday is the last of it. So I think as we move on with our partnership, that's really what I'm looking for from West Raleigh, is how can you help me do that? Because this is really an area of opportunity, along with our friends at the development for Lenovo. But I just wanted to make that clear that, we're all still learning and understanding what TIA means. But I really do feel like we have the best intentions here, and we really want this community to thrive. So I don't want that to get lost in translation. So thank you.
Sure. I have a handful of questions that may be for staff or might be for the applicant. There's unique characteristics about this area because it's event traffic, which is different than sort of regular movements of people going to work and school and the grocery store. So there's, I think, unique traffic considerations. One question that I have is, do we have a sense of how often there are these overlapping events? How often is there the state fair at the same time as a football game, at the same time as a Lady Gaga concert, and how often are we seeing layers of events?
Sure, and won't speak to any particular concert, although that sounded like a lot of fun. I think unofficial as it was, we went back just last year, the calendar year 2024, to see how many events took place at the arena, and then also compare that to other event activities in the area as well, to get a sense of, okay, how often would we see an overlap? So not official by any means, but there was 127 events at the Lenovo Center in 2024. Of the 127, 6 total had an overlapping event on the same calendar day. We didn't spend a good bit of time to understand if that one happened at 1 o'clock and the other one was at 8 o'clock that night, but just on the exact same day, it happened 6 times, which is less than 5%. Some of that was, 4 of those were state fair. So we counted the state fair, which goes on for 2 weeks, in that 127.
Got it. You said four of them were
4
the
were state fair.
So out of the 6 overlapping days,
That's
4
right.
of them
Thank
were
you.
the state
Yep.
fair. Got it. So in sort of if we imagine how many times does a worst case scenario or a max peak traffic happen? And we're talking about 6 times roughly a year.
Correct, yeah. For folks who've been in Raleigh for 20 years, we learned a really tough lesson a couple of decades ago, when we hope to never repeat that one.
And then I'm curious, Bradley, maybe you can speak to it, or the applicant can. How might the TIA be different? What factors could be considered differently for this kind of event traffic condition rather than how a regular old TIA for a different development would happen?
It's a great question, and I would happily defer to the applicant, their consultant team, who put a lot of time and effort into evaluating how this site compares to similar sites elsewhere in the country. And I know that was a big part of the discussion with NCDOT as they were shaping some of the assumptions in the model too. So if you don't mind. Yeah.
Thanks, Bradley. Richard Adams with Kimley Horn, 421 Fayetteville Street here in downtown Raleigh. So regarding the unique aspects of the TIA, certainly the big unique aspect is that we looked at an event scenario. Normally we just look at AM peak hour and PM peak hour of normal work days. But what we did was we actually counted a sold-out hockey game, sold-out arena, and basically did that scenario in addition to the regular peak hours, AM and PM. And then we specifically looked at the overlapping time of the evening rush hour overlapping with the arena loading, if you will. So, so that is the most unique thing. We also looked, obviously we have a mixed-use development here. Our hope, our expectation, the whole purpose really, the whole vision of this project is mixed use. People are going to walk between places and also to and from the development as a whole. And also people will be going there for dinner and then an event, or people will actually live there and go to events. People will work there and go to events. And so we're all looking for interaction and expecting interaction. So we did assume some reduction in trips. I think that we're all, hoping and expecting that. We capped that at 30% reduction. Normally we would expect that to be higher, but DOT really wanted to be conservative in this case. So, yeah, those are some of the unique aspects of it. And then the other thing that I did want to just remind everyone is that this is a rezoning TIA, and actually this rezoning is very unique because it's technically a downzoning because the existing zoning actually allows more square footage than the proposed zoning. So normally we would look at the difference, the extra development allowed by the zoning. That's a negative number. So we didn't look at that. We just simply looked at full build out of the zoning. So I did want to point that out as well. So any other questions on that?
Might have some more later, but
okay.
Not a follow-up on that specifically. But you mentioned that this is a rezoning TIA, and I do think it's useful to illuminate for the crowd, like there are sort of these different phases of the process. So this one that you all have run thus far is exploratory, and then regulatory ones would come later on in the process. I don't know who's best to speak to that, but perhaps you can.
Well, and happy for others to speak to this. But this, again, is for the rezoning. There would obviously be site plan approvals throughout this project for many years to come, and each one of those could possibly trigger another TIA, depending on the level of development and the city's requirements on that. So we all expect more TIAs to come. We also don't likely expect to get to full build out here, which was something in the order of 8 million square feet. I mean, we're not saying that'll never happen, but it's very unlikely. So we feel like we've been very conservative on various fronts in that case. So, but yes, more traffic study to come for sure.
Okay, and we have to wrap up here in just a moment, but one final question that I have. You mentioned that the TIA was run at full build out, so there's this sort of like, if we built everything, we'd have to put in this, and we have to put in that, and we have to put in that, but we probably won't build everything. So then what happens if you don't build everything? Like, how might the public have some comfort on what is likely to go in?
Right. So if we don't, like I say, we probably won't reach full build out because it's such a large number. But throughout, as I mentioned, throughout the process, there will be requirements by the city to reconsider traffic, and also DOT. We still need permitting from the DOT, as Bradley pointed out. All the roads around this development are DOT roads, and so and we're proposing some access points, either enhancements to access points or new access points to those roads, and so we'll need permitting from them. They're undoubtedly going to require more study as well. So, the public can rest assured that there will be more analysis to come that will be look at the traffic impact of the development as it's much more real, and we know exactly what's being built. And those traffic studies will be, of course, developed by the applicant and then reviewed by both the state and the city staff. So, thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we need to start closing up shop. Or any final questions or comments from committee members?
No, I'll just move to refer this to the full council with no recommended action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And members of the public, you are welcome to join us again on April 1st at 7 p.m. when the rezoning will be